Life is good again, right? For the past 4 years, I don't think any of you guys will disagree, life has been pretty good. We solved that problem. We're good. Then this happened. So what's happening right now is that no more are interfaces the only things that are hitting our servers. No more can we create an interface that has a form and it now is able to achieve all of the data input into my server. In fact, your watch would love to use the same interfaces that you use as a human to input data. It wants to input the data the same way, and in fact, it's trying to. It can't because Drupal it can't handle it. And there's a major uproar in Drupal right now because of this. But these devices are causing a problem. No more do we have to cater our interfaces to human interaction. I want you guys to put that in your mind. Humans will probably very, very shortly in the future account for 1/5 of your traffic. And because humans are slow, we're just slow compared to machines. Your Fitbit, your Apple Watch is wanting to submit data 5 times as fast, and guess what? It is wanting to use this thing called an API. And because we have built our entire systems, our structure of our servers, and the way that forms and the way that data works on this old paradigm that the server's responsible for basically creating the interface, we've locked ourselves into a system that does not cater to APIs. How many of you have built APIs in your system, but the API logic is completely separate from the form handling logic? It happens a lot right now. And the reason why you have to do that is because we are trying to essentially retrofit this API thing in response to have also needing form submissions. So we have ourselves a problem happening right now. But there's a solution. And the solution really starts with the forms. And that's what I really would like to argue, because forms represent, get this in your minds, forms are the user interface of an API. If you were to construct an API and say, I need a user interface for this API, that UI is a form. And I don't think many of you will argue to that. A form is a way to input data. It's a way to actually get that data into the system. So let's talk about Webforms for the future, which is called Webforms 3.0. With this movement, and this movement has actually been labeled Web 3.0. A lot of you probably have heard that tossed around right now. This movement of this shaking of what's happening in the web. In fact, there's a lot of frameworks that are just cropping out of the woodworks because of this. Angular.js is one, and I will talk a little bit about that, and I'll talk about React as well. These frameworks are coming out of the woodwork because of this new Web 3.0 mandate, in that applications now must be made differently. There has to be a total separation between the front end and the back end, where the front end application must only communicate to the back end via APIs. And I know this is a bold statement, but mobile first is no longer good enough. In fact, we really need to kind of rethink how we're building applications. And what I'd like to propose is that instead of mobile first, we need to start thinking API first. Because API first actually puts you in the mindset that what really matters is that your server becomes this API engine, and everything on top of it is the app. And it creates this total separation between the application and the back-end API server. So let's talk a little bit about what API first development means, and I will get into JSON-powered forms. I promise you. I have to get off my soapbox first. So the first thing you need to do is you need to build your REST platform first. Your REST platform must be stateless. This means you're not storing cookies and session and using that cookie to establish session. JWT authentication has become a really popular thing these days. It's something we use at Form.io. It provides a very stateless way to manage users and scale as well. Your first app should be an API test. And applications must only use those APIs, including forms. So why API first? The answer to this, I believe, is that it forces us to develop websites like web applications. And I would like for us to start using those terms separately. For many years, developers would build a website and they're like, yeah, I build web apps. And I think there should be a very distinct difference between a web application and a website. Website is when the server sends the website to the user's interface. A web application is this thing that exists all on its own. So there are a lot of platforms that are API first. A lot of things you can use today. We have angular.js, React, Ember, Backbone. I wanted to put Jekyll on here because Jekyll, in my opinion, represents something very interesting, which is static site generation. Have any of you guys done much with static site generation? You're basically building an entire front-end website that makes you feel like you're using PHP code to do it. But it basically builds a static website. And then, of course, Ionic. Somebody mentioned that they have an interest in Ionic. Ionic is actually Angular themed for the mobile device. So now we have this problem. And the problem is, now that our applications are completely separated from the front end to the back end, we now kind of have to go back to our roots, right? When you're building an app now and you want to build a form, you have to go to the HTML docs. You have to go to Bootstrap and say, how do I have to build an HTML form. And I'm just going to say it, but the good old-fashioned way sucks. Because it's no longer dynamic. You're no longer writing the schema on the back end that generates a form. You now have to actually write this entire form code on the front end to actually get that into your AngularJS application. So now with that said, I'd like to introduce, or I'm not introducing, this is actually a very well-known concept, which is dynamic form, JSON-powered forms. And this is a major movement that's happening in the web. It's happening in AngularJS. So it all really means that you're taking this form definition, this form schema, and you are now letting the client do it for you.